When I was in my mid-20s, I took a fancy for a certain lady in my life. And unfortunately, she wasn't an easy woman to be with, and she didn't really open up. So I had to spend my time whining and dining her, talking to her, taking slow walks, and having small conversations, only to find out one little thing about her family. And she asked me why. Why are you so interested to know about the family? I said, well, because I can't even write my Chinese name. And as a result, over time, she opened up, and that began the journey of me wanting to preserve the royal press. She's none other than my formidable auntie, who's 83 years old today. She's a person who's lived through the war, and I've been educated abroad, and we're trying to converge together on how I suggest technology and creative design, while she is thinking that the Japanese might still come back and haunt us. So the Royal Press is basically a letterpress printing company that was established in 1938. It's 75 years old today, founded by my grandfather. The family came from the Fujian province. And in that time, they had to make way to other parts of the world, and they moved over to Xiamen. And in China, there are only two ways out from two ports, one in Guangzhou and the other one in Xiamen. They took the first boat out of Xiamen, and they landed in Klang. And over the years, as they grew their printing businesses in Klang, my grandfather, Yi Lei Sui, had the opportunity to move over to Malacca. And that's when the Royal Press was formed. I found my grandfather to be a very interesting man because I've never met him, but he was a person who was so enterprising, moving from stations to stations. He set up a base to give his brothers, only to set up another for himself. He passed away at the age of 49, and my grandmother succeeded him. I spent the next 3 years at 26. For 3 years, I was just documenting oral history of the Royal Press, talking to people, looking through documents. It was a very personal journey in my life, and I enjoyed it very much because I was still in the corporate career, and this was a good place of just nurturing my soul in that sense. So I got down to business. I look at the blocks, I look at the types. I realized that we printed in 4 or 5 scripts in Tamil, Malay, English, Chinese. We were a polyglot country. We were serving a community that spoke in different languages. I opened the drawers to see what I could find. And some little documents I could find handwritten parcels of what my grandmother used to write, or notes that my grandfather used to have. I look at old wood blocks, how old wood blocks were used to make headlines of posters. And now in old wood blocks, you can see the vein and the textures. So each block, each type tells me a certain moment in time. So I got my hand into actually working the typesetting and having type by type to form. If I had to form TEDxKL today, I had to pick out letter by letter. I spent time with the composers. And this lady that you see here is 74 years old today. She started working with the Royal Press at the age of 18, and it is her first job, and she's never quit. I would like to think that the Royal Press has excellent management to keep her alive and keep her there. And she was responsible for printing the Chinese newspaper. And that library that you see there are the collection of Chinese types. The frequency of Chinese newspapers in the day was once a month. She would pick up the text and form it together. That is an example of how blocks are stacked and kept. And in that piece, it looks like an art to me, and that's why I took a fancy for it. You look at it in juxtaposed against text on the left and pie fonts on the right. You can see emblems and shapes coming together, forming graphics, forming information. What was very important for me was this. Here I am starting a preservation project on conservation. The first question I asked myself, how are you going to make it sustainable? How is this going to go for the long term? And it was very important for me to establish the social, culture, and commercial aspect. While Royal Press could be a very social enterprise, but if it didn't generate profit, it wouldn't make any sense. If it was entirely commercial and they had no soul, it wouldn't fit my mold either. And I thought culture was a big component of how dynamic things could be. And as a result, I realized that our family printing heritage was serving a community for 75 years. Our neighbors, our friends, other retailers. But there was a new audience that was starting to get interested in the Royal Press. there was the tourism market, there were institutions from designers, architects, writers who wanted that craft to come back up again. I had a chance to work with Discovery Channel to work on a documentary that gave us a major push of exposing the Royal Press across Asia. And lastly, I had a chance to work with the Gutenberg Museum, which was the founding museum where movable type was coming together. And they mentioned to us that the Royal Press has a chance to become the first polyglot printing museum in the world because by nature that we were serving a multilingual community. We were using scripts to communicate, while in Europe, Latin and Greek or Hebrew were used as languages for translation, whereas here in Malaysia we were communicating. And I thought that was exactly the One Malaysia program. And how did we begin? Small conversations, big ideas, a lot of people coming together from all walks of life. I sat down with the family to get counsel. I spoke to architects. I spoke to random videographers to come alongside to talk to me further. And what we did was we tried to do a mock-up. And what we endeavored was to take 2 rooms of the Royal Press and kind of flesh it out to the family and to the audience to see whether this would be a pilot project that could take off further. And the first feature was a family wall. We wanted to recognize our forefathers. We wanted to ensure that they were remembered, not so much for them and them alone, but for the younger generation who was to come. We worked with a local retailer who was still producing liqueur bottles. We were printing their labels for the last 40 or 50 years. And I bought a stack of their bottles and placed it in one of our panel windows to display and to show them that we can blend print, graphics, and the story of a community around us to share this platform together. It was very important for me that I didn't want to overdress the Royal Press. I took out each and every material and I looked through the documents to say in which part of time told a certain social history of Malaysia and categorized them naturally and just pinned them together and displayed it across with the family lounge so that they could remember, yes, I remember this document, we printed this, so and so was still here. And those were little stories that I was still continuing to document because people was very important to me. In staging the museum, it was so easy to get all things new, but I placed it upon myself out of curiosity. I wanted to try without. And we just started using pallets of paper to put things together to stage tables. And in all beautiness, there's always a sense of ugliness. So how did we really begin after that? I had to do a major cleanup. And the idea was to revive, restore, rejuvenate. And removing things was a big challenge for me because the family was typically Hokkien. They like to hoard, they like to keep. They say they're thrifty, but this is what you see lah. So as a result, we started coming together. And from this premise, we turned it out to become like this. We look at old machineries like that. They're a piece of junk in some degree, but they're actually machineries from the 18th century shipped in from China. I took out every single part and degreased them with a bunch of technicians in Malacca. And we put back every single part, looked for the color paint across books to match. And obviously the challenges kept coming. And this was a mountain full of things. And basically we had to clear this out and then dedicate this to the family feature. We also cleared up access roads so that the tourists could come in, and we made it like this. If you take a look at the door, it might look a bit unassuming to you, but I was given an opportunity to remove the entire door and throw it out. But instead, I suggested to the heritage contractor, take this door, shave off the bottom because that has been eaten up by the water salt and termites, cut it off, level it down, so that the story would be represented that the door is still in place and that the fact that we did not simply throw away money but reuse materials that could work for us. The Royal Press has taken a very different landscape over the many years, as you can see from the various prints and logos. And I wanted to give birth to a new era of Royal Press by making it sustainable, by telling this story that is of family heritage, but has now become a national heritage because of documenting social history. And the idea was to really stretch it further. If you ask me whether I knew I was going to be doing this, the answer was no. If I knew, I probably wouldn't have started. So if you ever life hack again, Don't be afraid to take out a journal, try small things, write it down, write down your ideas. Don't be afraid to open the drawers in your life. You never know what you might find inside. You might find skeletons, but you may also find gems that keep you going. Thank you very much.